What happens when a country music superstar walks into the lion's den of daytime television and refuses to back down from one of America's most outspoken hosts? The result is an explosive confrontation that leaves the studio audience stunned and the show in complete chaos. Asterisk, before diving into this incredible moment, viewers are urged to subscribe and share their thoughts on celebrities standing their ground on live television. Asterisk, Blake Shelton walked onto the View set that morning with his trademark confidence, tipping his cowboy hat to the cheering audience. The country music legend had been invited to discuss his latest album and upcoming tour, what appeared to be a routine promotional appearance. But it quickly became clear that Joy Behar had other plans. Asterisk, with a razor-sharp smile, Joy welcomed him by saying, "Well, well, well. Look who decided to grace us with his presence." She then added pointedly, "Blake Shelton, the voice of rural America." Or should I say, the voice of a very specific part of rural America. Asterisk, Blake's smile didn't fade, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he replied politely, "Good morning to you too, Joy. Always a pleasure to be here with you, lovely ladies." Asterisk, Joy immediately cut him off, leaning forward in her chair. She dismissed his charm and challenged his recent comments about small-town values, accusing him of implying that people from small towns were more moral and patriotic than city dwellers. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances as the tension began to rise. Whoopi Goldberg attempted a gentle redirect, but Joy was just getting started. Asterisk, Blake calmly responded that he had never said small-town people were better than anyone else. He explained that what he meant was that small towns often teach values like community, helping neighbors, and working hard. Joy waved his explanation away, accusing him of implying that country music stars represent real Americans while everyone else is somehow fake. Asterisk, although Blake's jaw tightened, he remained composed. He told Joy she was putting words in his mouth and said he respected people from all walks of life, whether they lived in New York City or a town of just a few thousand people. Asterisk, Joy pressed further, arguing that Blake's entire persona was built on the idea that real America exists only in the heartland, while places like New York where she grew up don't count. The audience fell silent as the exchange took an unexpected turn. Another host attempted to shift the topic back to Blake's music, but Joy refused to let it go. Asterisk, she launched into a critique of what she called a small-town superiority complex, accusing Blake of judging others while making millions singing about pickup trucks and dirt roads. She pointed out that he had lived in Hollywood and Nashville for decades and questioned when he had last actually lived in one of the small towns he often sang about. Asterisk, at that point, Blake's relaxed demeanor changed. Kay straightened his shoulders and, for the first time, looked genuinely annoyed. He explained that although he lived in Nashville now, he had not forgotten where he came from. He described growing up in Ada, Oklahoma, in a working-class family, and knowing what it was like to live in a place where everyone knew each other. Asterisk, Joy immediately fired back, pointing out his massive wealth, multiple homes, and private jets. She accused him of playing the common man card while living a life far removed from the people he claimed to represent. Asterisk, Blake's famous smile finally cracked. He told Joy that success doesn't erase someone's roots. He, wedged that he had been blessed, but said it hadn't changed who he was or where he came from, adding that he was proud of it. Asterisk, Joy responded sharply, accusing him of exploiting that image for profit. She claimed his entire brand was built on a divisive mythology that pits simple country folk against sophisticated city people, and said the act was getting old. Asterisk, the tension in the studio became impossible to ignore. Whoopi tried once again to steer the conversation away, but Blake was no longer interested in playing nice. He repeated Joy's word, exploit, and pushed back firmly, saying he wrote and sang about his own life and experiences. That, he insisted, was authenticity, not exploitation. He added that if Joy couldn't tell the difference, perhaps that said more about her than about him. Joy's eyes flashed with anger. She scoffed at the word authentic, calling Blake as fake as a $3 bill and accusing him of being a manufactured product of the Nashville machine. The audience gasped, and even the other hosts looked visibly uncomfortable as the confrontation crossed a line from heated debate into something far more personal. Blake slowly stood up, his tall frame towering over the panel. He told Joy that he had taken her shots out of respect for the show and the people on it. But he would not sit there and allow his character and integrity to be attacked. Joy mocked him, asking if she had struck a nerve and insisting that the truth hurts. Blake's voice remained steady but ice cold as he responded. He accused Joy of spending years behind that desk, tearing people down, throwing stones at anyone who didn't share her worldview, and then calling it entertainment. Joy flushed with anger and defended herself by calling it honesty. Blake shook his head and replied that real honesty would mean admitting she had already judged him before he ever walked onto the set. He told her she didn't want a conversation, she wanted a fight. Joy didn't deny it. She said maybe it was time someone called him out. The studio crackled with tension as cameras continued rolling, capturing a confrontation no one had anticipated. Blake looked at Joy with a mix of disappointment and anger and said if she wanted to call him out, they should do it properly. He accused her of criticizing people she had never met and places she had never been, and questioned why she spoke about small towns as if the people who lived there were beneath her. Joy leaned back defensively and insisted she never said that tonally, that his portrayal of them was fake. Blake's voice rose as he repeated the word fake, firmly defending his lived experiences. Blake pushed back firmly, saying he didn't learn about small-town life from books or television. He lived it. He described growing up in a place where, if a neighbor's barn burned down, 20 families would show up the very next day to help rebuild it. If someone got sick, the entire community rallied around them. That wasn't fake, he said, that was real life. Joy interrupted sharply, dismissing his words as a Norman Rockwell painting. She argued that small towns have serious problems too: poverty, addiction, and close-mindedness. Sand accused Blake of never singing about those realities. Only the pretty parts. Blake's hands clenched at his sides. He told her he knew the hard parts very well. His hometown had suffered factory closures. Young people had left because there were no opportunities. He had seen families lose everything. But despite all of that, he said, those same people still looked out for one another. They still had dignity. They still had heart. Joy shot back that those same people continued to vote for politicians who kept them struggling, adding that Blake probably didn't want to talk about that. The other hosts frantically tried to signal for a commercial break, but the confrontation had taken on a life of its own. Blake pointed directly at Joy and said that was exactly what he meant. He accused her of believing she knew better than everyone else, of thinking she could sit in a New York studio and tell people in Oklahoma, Kansas, or Iowa how to think, how to vote, and how to live their lives. Joy's voice grew shrill as she insisted someone had to tell people the truth. She accused Blake of manipulating people by profiting off their nostalgia and fears. Blake let out a bitter laugh and responded that he had never told anyone how to vote or how to think. He said he sang about his own life experiences that millions of people related to, and if that somehow threatened her, maybe she needed to ask herself why. Joy snapped back that it didn't threaten her, disgusted her. She mocked what she called fake patriotism and the idea of real America, as if others weren't real Americans too. Blake stepped closer to the panel, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. He said what disgusted him was the Joy spoke about patriotism like it was something to be ashamed of, the way she mocked people who loved their country, respected the flag, and honored veterans. He asked what was fake about that. Joy shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She told Blake not to dare question her patriotism and claimed she had been fighting for America's real values longer than he had been alive, not the manufactured heartland mythology he was selling. Blake raised his voice to match hers, accusing her of fighting for values by tearing down anyone who disagreed with her, mocking traditions that meant something to people, and acting like half the country was too stupid to think for themselves. The studio fell completely silent. The audience watched in shock as security guards quietly moved closer to the set, ready to step in if things went any further. Joy clenched her jaw and said she didn't think people were stupid. She thought they were being lied to by people like Blake, who told them their problems were someone else's fault. Blake shook his head in disbelief and said he had never blamed anyone for anything in his music. He sang about working hard, about family, and about finding joy in simple things. If that was controversial to her, he said, then maybe she was the one with the problem. Joy mocked him again, repeating the phrase, simple things, and sarcastically asked if that meant sitting on a porch with a beer while pretending the world wasn't falling apart. Blake's face flushed red. He said she was right about one thing: he did enjoy sitting on his porch with a beer. And after dealing with people who thought they were smarter than everyone else and had all the answers, he said, finding a little peace felt pretty good. Joy laughed harshly and called that ignorance. Blake fired back that it was contentment something she clearly didn't understand. He accused her of being so angry at the world and so busy telling everyone else how wrong they were, that she had forgotten how to be happy. Joy's voice cracked with emotion as she asked how anyone could be happy when there was so much injustice in the world. She questioned how he could sing his songs while people were suffering. Blake's anger softened into something closer to pity. He said people had always suffered, and what helped them survive was community, faith, hope, and love. The same things he sang about, the same things she seemed to dismiss as worthless. Joy replied shakily that those things were worthless when they were used to keep people from demanding better. Blake quietly asked who got to decide that: the media, politicians, or her. He suggested that maybe people were smart enough to decide for themselves. Joy slammed her hand on the table and accused him of manipulating people while pretending to be just like them. Blake stood perfectly still, staring at her. Then, slowly, he removed his cowboy hat. In an eerily calm voice. Blake said she was right about one thing: he was a millionaire, and his life was different now. But there was one thing she was completely wrong about. He placed his hat carefully on the table and said he had never pretended to be anything other than who he truly was. He had never hidden his success or his wealth, and he had never claimed to be something he wasn't. Then he looked directly at Joy and asked quietly, "Can you say the same?" Joy's face went pale as she demanded to know what that was supposed to mean. Blake's smile turned cold as ice, and he replied that maybe before lecturing others about authenticity, she should take a long look in the mirror. Blake told Joy that before lecturing others about authenticity, she should take a long look in the mirror. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence as Joy processed his words. Her expression shifted through shock and disbelief before hardening into pure rage. How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. She accused Blake of coming onto her show and attacking her personally. Blake calmly picked up his cowboy hat and placed it back on his head with deliberate movements. He reminded her that this was The View, not the Joy Behar Show. and said he wasn't attacking her, he was responding to her repeated personal attacks on him. Joy's voice rose again as she mocked him, accusing him of hiding behind folksy wisdom and a tired act. She told him she had been in the business far longer than he had been wearing that ridiculous hat. Blake raised his eyebrows slightly and asked what business she meant. Entertainment, he said, because as far as he was concerned, they were both entertainers. The only difference, he added, was that he didn't pretend his entertainment was more important than anyone else's. Joy straightened in her chair, her voice reaching a crescendo. She insisted that she informed people, educated them, and helped them understand the world. Blake calmly asked what was wrong with helping people escape from reality for a few minutes. What was wrong, he asked, with giving people a bit of happiness or letting them forget their troubles for a while? Joy laughed bitterly and argued that while people were distracted, their problems were only getting worse. She accused Blake of trapping people in songs about simpler times while the world moved on without them. Blake shook his head and said that all he had seen from her that day was an attempt to tear him down. He asked if that was what she called education. Joy fired back that she was exposing the fantasy people like Blake were selling a fantasy that kept people from demanding real change. Blake pressed her, asking what changes she believed he was preventing. Joy gestured angrily and listed better jobs, better health care, and better education, accusing him of encouraging people to remain content in a make-believe world where everything was simple and pure. Blake studied her quietly for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but more cutting. He said he believed Joy was angry because people found comfort in things that didn't come from her. He suggested she couldn't stand that, despite all her lecturing and educating. People still chose to find joy in simple songs about simple pleasures. Joy's face flushed red as she denied it. But Blake continued. He said she couldn't tolerate people finding happiness in things she didn't understand or control, and that she resented someone she considered intellectually beneath her being, able to connect with people in ways she never could. Joy accused him of manipulation, claiming he fed people lies about how things used to be so they wouldn't notice how bad things had become. Blake laughed harshly and said he had never claimed the past was better or that people should go backward. He said he sang about appreciating what you have: family, friends, and community, if that was manipulation. Then he accepted the accusation. Joy's voice broke as she accused him of keeping people satisfied with less than they deserved. Blake stared at her for a long moment before slowly turning and walking toward the edge of the set. He said he had come to talk about his music and have a conversation, but it was clear she had a different agenda. Joy demanded to know where he was going and insisted they weren't finished. Blake stopped and turned back to face her. He told her they were finished because there was no point in continuing a conversation with someone who only wanted to attack instead of discuss. Joy shouted that she wanted to talk about the truth and his responsibility as a public figure. Blake responded incredulously, saying his responsibility was to his fans, the people who bought his music and attended his shows. His responsibility, he said, was to be honest about who he was and what he believed. He didn't owe her or anyone else an apology for that. Joy completely lost her composure and shouted that he owed the American people an end to what she called small-town mythology, accusing him of pretending that ignorance was bliss. Face turned stone cold. He pointed out that she had once again just called millions of Americans ignorant people who lived in small towns, worked hard, raised their families, and tried to do right by their neighbors.